friends, and welcome to the CUInsight Network podcast. My name is Lauren Culp. I'm the president and CEO at CUInsight.com. And it's my job on this show to have conversations with the thought leaders who support the credit union community. Together, we get to identify those issues that affect credit unions and talk about all of the best practices out there. The goal being that we learn from one another and improve our industry together. My guest on today's show is Pixie Gray. She is the VP of Organizational Development at CUIs. Pixie, thank you so much for being here.
Lauren, thanks so much for having me. It's a real privilege. I'm excited to connect with you and your audience today.
Most of us didn't grow up thinking we'd get to work with credit unions, although we've happily found ourselves in this industry. So my first question for you is, what did you want to be growing up?
That's a great question. When I was growing up, I think it changed over time. I remember a point in history when I wanted to be a criminologist, and I remember a time in history where I wanted to be a chef. And then ultimately I went to college for acting. So not any kind of consistency in those ideas, but I think I changed my mind pretty consistently and I had no idea what a credit union was, much less had a plan to end up in the credit union system. So you are exactly right. That was not the plan when I was younger.
I love all of your diverse interests. So many good options. So tell us then a little bit about what the journey was like to your current role now as VP of Organizational Development at CUIs.
Well, it was right around 2009, and I had been in the service industry for a really long time and was working at a local bar and restaurant here in Central Texas. And I was also going to school. And every morning I would drive to my local credit union branch. I finally got a credit union account, and I would deposit my tips from the prior day before going to class. And after doing this for about a year, I was depositing my paycheck, my payroll check in my credit union account. And my teller that morning, and this is like 7 a.m, it's before anybody else is at the branch. So it's just this one teller, and I see her literally every morning. She says across the intercom, "Girlie, what are you going to do with your life? You can't be a bartender forever." And I laughed and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "You're always so friendly and we're hiring. We're looking for a part-time teller." And I said, "Don't you have to have a degree or special skills?" And she said, "Well, you've got good people skills and that's the hardest thing to teach. So how about you come in for an interview and we'll see what happens." And so began my credit union employment. And I went on to work for that credit union all the way from a part-time teller into the organizational development team and consulting and advising for executives. I led an innovation team for several years. And that entire tenure spanned almost 12 years. And I was employed for a total of 10 of those years because I left for a little while after I had my daughter. But that was how I got into credit unions. And it's been, I don't know that I'd want to say an obsession, but it's definitely the passion that drives so much of what I do and what I think about in my personal life and in my professional life now.
That is such a cool story. And I love what they were saying about people skills are the hardest to teach. That's so great. And I think so many of us have accidentally tripped our way into the credit union industry and then been so passionate about it once we've gotten here. I'd love to know more about CUIs. CUInsight and CUIs have been longtime partners and loved collaborating together. But for those who may not know, tell me a little bit more about CUIs, where and how you all add value for credit unions.
Sure. So CUIs stands for Credit Union Executives Society, but very few people know that. And so we just refer to ourselves as CUIs. We aim to provide excellent leadership and professional development services for leaders of credit unions. And that includes 4 key audiences. That includes the executives or C-suite in the credit union. That also includes HR leaders. That includes the board, as well as emerging leaders. And so we work with those 4 audiences to make sure that as the industry changes and as the needs of the credit union change, we are able to provide additional training, additional development, additional leadership opportunities and leadership training so that we can have a strong succession plan in the credit union movement, that we can have strong partnerships, that we can witness the success of each of the credit unions, which we know ultimately leads to the success of the communities.
I just love the mission of CUIs, and I think there has been so much value added over the years. We know too that leadership development resources really abound in the market today. There are a ton of leadership development resources around every corner. Now, CUIs offers solutions for leadership development. But why do you think credit unions might find your offerings are probably the best aligned with the leadership development that they need?
That's a great question, Lauren. Thank you. There are seemingly limitless choices for leadership development in the market. But a lot of those options are not industry specific. They're high quality, but they don't understand the heart of the credit union movement. They don't understand that credit unions as a cooperative operate differently, and that being part of the community and inviting the community to be part of the credit union is a critical piece to the success of the credit union and the community. We understand credit unions' unique cooperative business model, and that means we're able to address the unique challenges facing credit union leaders of today and tomorrow. Through our events and offerings, we're creating connection points that support credit union talent and keep collaboration at the forefront of all that we do. And it's exciting because we're building on CUI's legacy. We've been around for a minute, and we're building on that within the credit union system, but also realizing that there is a lot of room for us to dive deeper with our members and to uncover the new needs and to solve for those needs. I think in this way, we're able to address problems by building new solutions in partnership with credit unions, as well as recognizing the history, where we've come and where we're going, and knowing those solutions will apply and support other credit unions as well.
Absolutely. I think it is such a good aligned program and good aligned resources for credit unions. And being aligned so closely with credit unions, it's really clear that you personally, but also CUIs as an organization, are really passionate about the credit union mission. Can you talk a little bit about why that matters so much to you all?
I think we're passionate about it because members and communities both benefit when we achieve the credit union's missions. They are directly related. There's a symbiotic relationship between communities and credit unions. And if we're supporting credit unions, we're supporting their communities and vice versa. We know that when leaders and teams feel supported and challenged, creativity and productivity, they increase. We are more likely to find new and better ways to grow credit unions through a doing good by doing well mentality. And CUIs is really thrilled to have the opportunity to help make that happen.
I know our credit union system really is only as strong as our people. And so investing in them through resources like what CUIs provides is so important. And when you think about what's next for our industry and the people in it, how do you think credit unions can both remain relevant, but also grow?
Well, I think remaining relevant means that we have to stay open to the idea that what we've always done won't necessarily get us to where we want to go. It's that old adage that what got us here won't get us there. So we've got to stay open to changing how we show up and identifying the needs and the interests of our community to stay relevant to what those latest needs and interests are. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think the things that are coming down the pike for the credit union industry in general, we need to be thinking about things like succession planning. We've had such a rich history in the credit union movement of folks leading well and building the movement to what it is now. And so many of those folks are stepping out of their roles, either into retirement or other roles. And I think we've got a huge opportunity for younger leaders, newer leaders, different leaders to step in. And so being willing to see what those newer leaders, those different leaders have to say, some of those ideas, tuning into the community directly to find out what those needs and interests are, those two things combined are going to position us to stay relevant. But it's going to take a different way of thinking as we move forward with the advancements of technology, with the mergers that are happening in our industry and elsewhere. It's just going to require us to get curious and really investigate how we can serve our community and those credit unions best.
I love what you said about getting curious. I think that is a great place to start. And as we look to the future, where would you say the focus is for CUIs for the road ahead?
We are doing a deep dive into those 4 audiences. We did a bit of a brand audit over the course of this last year and learned some things about the CUIs brand. We have a very strong relationship history, and it's time for us to more or less take our own advice. And those things I said about new leadership, about new ways of thinking, we brought in a new CEO about a year ago, Heather McKissick, and she has been an excellent thought leader and an excellent trailblazer for us. We're also taking a look at our offerings and recognizing that what was a relevant offering 4 years ago, 5 years ago, pre-COVID, even in the last few years, the way the industry has changed and the industry needs have changed, we have to update and modify our content. So we're working on adding new content to our talent development portfolio. We're also giving a refresh to our consulting arm to make sure that we're truly adding a heightened level, an elevated level of service and of support to our member organizations. And we're constantly refining the content that we've always offered through HMM and through things like our CEO Institute, which has an incredible legacy and is such a powerful program. We're always looking at those programs and those products to make sure that what we are offering is relevant to the current market, that it is ahead of the needs and the changes of the current market, and that we are also promoting the needs of our members in the best possible way.
I'm so excited for the future for CUES. And as Heather has taken the helm, it will be so cool to see where you all go next. As we wrap up the show, I always like to have some fun with rapid fire questions to let our listeners get to know you a little better. The questions are rapid, but we always say your answers don't have to be. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thanks so much. This is fun.
Okay. First question. Who is someone in your life that was a great leader and what makes them so great?
Someone in my life that was a great leader and what makes them so great. I feel like this might be a common answer. My first exposure to credit union leadership was Tony Boudet. And I say that's common because I know he's famed in the credit union world. I had the very, very good fortune to work at University Federal Credit Union beginning 2009 or 2010. And that was where I started my part-time teller journey. That was the teller that invited me into the credit union movement. And at that time, I think there were between 300 and 400 employees at the credit union. And Tony, I believe all the way up until his departure in 2023, made a point of meeting with every employee within the first few months of their employment. And he would meet with a group of anywhere from 6 to 12 employees is what I recall. And he would talk about who he was as a person and his journey as a leader, his journey through the credit union system, and why credit unions were so important. And he was so intentional and thoughtful about bringing other leaders in to support the credit union in the community, but also really go out into the community and figure out what they needed. So watching Tony as he very intentionally and very thoughtfully brought those leaders into place, but then also led the organization from a heartfelt and a human-led position, it taught me what I would say is the absolute foundation of what I know to be good leadership. He walked the talk and he led with compassion. There was no decision he made that was accidental. And I'm really grateful that I got to witness that kind of a leadership as my first entree into true organizational leadership. From that, I've been able to work with other excellent leaders. Heather McKissick is one of them, to build on what good leadership looks like, what inclusive leadership looks like, what thoughtful human-led leadership looks like. And so, yeah, Tony just stands out as a really formative influence in my very beginning understanding of what is leadership and how to lead well.
That is such a great answer. I always love those stories of impact that stick with us for our whole career. All right, next question. If you're going to splurge on something, say you want to treat yourself, what is one thing you might invest a bit in, whether that's time or resources?
Oh man, if I'm going to splurge. So I'm an experience seeker and I'm not a big adrenaline junkie, but I do love complete experiences. So I am probably going to invest in some kind of interesting dining experience where a lot of thought has been put into not just the menu and the food composition, but also into the environment, the aesthetic, the textures, even so much as like the smells or the lighting and the service as well. So there are a handful of places that I like to go to if I'm going to splurge and just really immerse myself in a dining experience. That's probably top of my list.
That is a great answer. Next question for you. If you travel for work, many of us do, what is that city that you're most excited to visit, whether it's for a client visit or if you see a conference agenda come out? What's that city that you're so excited to see?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I did do a lot of traveling. In the month of July, I think I was on the road for 23 days, which is unusual, but I was taking advantage of some open calendar time. My favorite city, I'll go with my gut. I'm not sure this is the absolute right answer, but my gut was Baltimore. And I just have a bunch of memories about traveling to Baltimore. I used to work in the music industry as well. And so Baltimore had a particular sentimentality to me, but also I've got some great friends there. So there's some great food sites. And there's a sort of sense of close-knitness in that community that is different, in my opinion, than other cities that I've been to across the nation.
I don't know that Baltimore has ever been an answer before, but I'm actually originally from Baltimore, so I love this.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I mean, like I love Baltimore, and I don't know the name of the neighborhood, but there's a neighborhood that's over on the water. It's got a lot of cobblestone streets. It's got a small little park and square. There's a restaurant there called Mama's on the Half Shell that we always go to, but it's just the aquarium there is beautiful. The people there, I think, are really lovely. It's got the right combination for me of small community meets sort of edgy East Coast, and I really, really enjoy going to Baltimore. If I've got to fly into the Northeast, like I flew in for a wedding to DC last year, and on purpose, I flew into and out of Baltimore so that I could get an extra stop in.
That is so fun. Conference planners, take note. We want more Baltimore conferences. All right. Next question. What is a book you think everyone should read?
The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. That book in particular, so I want to be careful not to misquote her or misrepresent her, but my recollection is Priya came from a very divided background and a very divided home. And she is, I believe, a mediator for a national organization to the effect of NATO, maybe. And I read the book years and years ago. I saw her speak, but it made such an impression on me. I haven't read it in a couple of years, but she talks about how the art of gathering, bringing people together, begins the moment you have the idea. And she talks about it from the perspective of considering who you want there, the idea that if everyone is invited, then no one is intentionally invited. And so being thoughtful and careful about who is in the room. I mean, this woman works with entities from all over the globe, and she's got some fascinating tips and tricks for how to de-escalate a room and how to make sure each person is seen and heard. And it was one of the most formative reads I have had as far as how I think of the work that we do in organizational development and how we operate in the intersection of systems and the people within those systems.
I have not read that book, but we are going to link it in the show notes and I will have to add it to my list. It looks like a great read. Next question for you. What would you say has been your best hack for creating balance and integration between your work life and what I always call your life?
Yes, I agree with that. It's just one big life, isn't it? And there's a portion of it that goes towards work, and then there's the rest of it. So I'm going to reference some other authors, the Nagoski sisters. They wrote a couple of books together, and they did a podcast with Brene Brown that gave me a particular tip. And I believe it was published during COVID, so it was especially relevant in that time. But they talk about how when human beings are in crisis, we forget a key piece at the end of the crisis. And crisis could be a really stressful day at work. Crisis could be something more significant like a death in the family or an emergency. It could be COVID, right? So crisis is a spectrum, and I don't want to minimize a daily crisis versus a life impacting crisis. But the point is that when you see that threat and when you see that stressor, our typical approach is to recognize the stressor, address it, and relieve it. And then after that, we move on to the next stressor. But there's this piece we're missing in between where once we've relieved the stress or we've resolved the threat, we need to signal to our systems that we are okay. And we usually do that with very specific things that we only do when we aren't stressed. And some examples that I've heard are things like sitting down to have dinner with your family at the end of your day and being intentional about connecting with them, or going on a walk in your favorite part of the neighborhood, or taking a slow, intentional walk through your backyard, or a breathing exercise. Those are certain things we don't think to do when we are in crisis necessarily. And so part of how I draw the line at the end of my workday before I transition into the rest of my life is I've got some end of day rituals that include making my list for the next day so that I can clear my brain of what's happening, and making sure that I've responded to the emails that are critical for the day so that I'm not thinking of those lingering things or leaving other people on edge waiting for my response. and just kind of intentionally closing the crisis loop to then sit down. And I try most nights to have dinner with my kiddo and be really intentional about connecting with her so that we can close that crisis loop together.
I have not heard it described that way, but I really like the way that you are talking about that and framing that. And I think that's so important. That's not an answer I've heard before, but I really like that.
Thanks, Lauren.
We're going to link to everything that we talked about today in the show notes, books, everything else, CU's website, all that good stuff. But my last question for you, Pixie, is do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share or final asks of our listeners today?
I think that it's really, really important for us to stay curious. And so I'm going to ask folks who are listening to get curious about all manner of things, get curious about themselves, get curious about how they show up, why they show up, the outcomes that they're achieving. Get curious about their organizations and what their communities really need. Get curious about the voices that don't get enough airtime. Find opportunities to connect and just ask questions and get to know the folks around you. And of course, that comes from a place of assuming best intent, but be curious about what new skills can be built and what new offerings you can find. I'm very excited about the portfolio of offerings that CUIs is going to produce. I think it's new and it's fresh and it's different. I'm working with my colleague, Chad Helmanak, and we are coming up with really, really strong programming that he brings many, many years of credit union experience in the movement in numerous organizations. And I'm bringing innovation and very specific experience from programming, workshopping, facilitation, and program development. So we've got two really different mindsets. And so I'm going to encourage folks to continue to be curious about one another and the community and the folks around them, but also be curious about what new ideas can we bring to the credit union movement and to the communities we are serving to strengthen and re-engage the credit unions as we've known them to be, so we can continue to be a pillar of the organizations that we have always served so well.
That is a perfect way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Pixie, for being on the show today. And I hope to get the chance to run into you in person sometime here soon.
Lauren, thank you so much. I'm sure we will. This community, this movement, while it is robust and strong, it is still small. It's small but mighty. So I'm looking forward to running into you as well. And I'm so hopeful that you and I get to connect in person. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's been an absolute privilege.
It sure has. And hopefully we'll connect in Baltimore.
That would be perfect.
Stay well. And thank you to all of our listeners today for tuning into the CUInsight Network podcast. And we will be back again next time.